Right, so Studio Arts 11 and 12 with some very brave year 10s. Doing a comparison and contrast of two artworks, looking at Rick Moore's The Futile City and Albert Tucker's The Desolate Place. One is a painting with oils, the other is a lithograph. I've been asked to tackle materials and techniques to start building up that tower to get some more information. Don't worry about misspell mistakes, we'll work on those later. So looking at the materials of these two artworks, bam, 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 here we are. So one is an oil on cardboard, and the other is a lithograph. So it would even just start by mentioning that. So the first one, Futile City, is oil on cardboard. Same thing as you get all your packing stuff in. So it's just good old-fashioned cardboard. Doesn't have to be on anything fancy. You could even talk about why perhaps the artist selected cardboard. So number two, we're also going to be looking at the lithograph. For those of you who are unaware, a lithograph is a form of printmaking where you etch and scratch. So you etch and scratch onto a relief medium like a sheet of acetate or something, onto a relief sheet or a block, and then you use chemicals and inks to press the image. It's like those big printing wheel things we have around the room. The lithograph is one of those particular styles of art. So it's a lithograph of Desolate Place. Excellent. So Futile City, oil on cardboard. So obviously with oil paints, it's a game of anyone here who's painted with oil paints will know that not only do they stink, but they take a long time to dry. So there'll be lots of layers. And we can see in this one, we'll always have to refine lots of layers. Lots of layers is a little bit sort of entry level. We can do this. There's lots of different kinds of paint thrown on there. And I know some of you that have already done oil paints have really realized that you have to be very patient and take a lot of time. So we've talked about the brush strokes in this one being very thick and heavy. So we'll mention that as well. So it's lots of layers with thick, heavy brush strokes. And we would even say that the brush strokes aren't sort of all thick and heavy. They're very thick and heavy in the sky, but they become sort of more delicate out through the sand. So we could say thick, heavy brush strokes in the sky and towards the top of the composition, but lighter in the foreground. And even looking at the sky, there's lots of tonal blending and probably lots of wet on wet painting in there as well, where the artist, obviously oil paint takes a long time to dry, you can go sploosh, 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 sploosh. Put a whole lot in there with tonal blending being apparent. And I'll come back to that one if I can get more. Looking back at the lithograph, it's etchy, it's sketchy. Each of these itty-bitty little lines that we can sort of see in this artwork, each of these itty-bitty little lines is a single sort of carving printing tool that has been scoured and scored into the print. So it's been scored and scoured, scored and scoured, scored and scoured in great detail in many places to create. What am I creating here? I'm creating that thing that begins with T, texture, and the other one is, I was going to say zone, texture and tone. So we've got the texture and tone, we've got the scouring, we've got the cutting. When you're making prints, to make things deep and dark and sort of very much gloomy, 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 you want to leave the carving flat. So in this area, these ones with lots of scratches have been very, very, very busy and very delicate. And these areas of white have been cut out very deeply. So there is a great range of different cutting and etching techniques, from deep recessing to shallow layers of scratching. Again, it's like Shrek, it's all about layers. So I have 30 seconds left. Going back to the Futile City in terms of materials and techniques, we could even talk about impasto or painting wet into wet, and using things like washes and blends, because you can see there's lots of different tones going on in the sky. And I doubt that's just sort of one shade. I imagine he's gone through with very thin shades, very watery paint, or thinned it out with some kind of linseed oil or baby oil to create thin layers of wash and glaze to get that sort of glowing, luminous effect. Ow!